All right, so usually we talk around the fire in a group and exchange. So I'm going to go through this presentation, and then hopefully you guys can have some questions and stuff or things you'd like to add, because it's an important part of the process. So in Bwiti, we like to say "bukaye," which is welcome. Hello. My name's Ryan Geniger-Rich, as he said, and just to introduce myself real quickly, I'm the founder of Root Healing, which is like, we have Iboga retreats around the world. And more locally and recently, we opened a church here in Connecticut that's called Base Root. And we've been there since August. And Sarah, who's here with me, works there with me. But yeah, really what I want to talk about is this tradition and this medicine that I've seen absolutely miraculous things happen with. And basically now, as our world seems to be sick, and we're feeling this disconnection and experience in our modern world, I want to look at some potential historical and philosophical roots, dive into the ancient wisdom, and then reconnect us to wholeness, which is what's going to be the Bwiti tradition. So I'll get through kind of the boring stuff, which is how we got here, the modern predicament. Let's start by acknowledging a shared experience, a growing sense of disconnection that seems to permeate modern life. Despite hyperconnectivity, many people are grappling with feelings of loneliness and isolation, which can often accompany an increase in depression and anxiety. Alongside these emotional mental health concerns, various forms of addiction are also prevalent, saturated by technology, social media, and in the work we do, a lot of people always associate us with just treating addiction. So we do see a lot of addiction, but I don't think drug addiction is the only type of addiction. And a lot of us now, I think everyone that I know almost has a phone. And this stuff is serious. It's cutting us off from our lives. We need to be careful about this. So, it's not just limited to our internal worlds, it also extends to our relationship to our family, our friends, to the planet, and to nature. As we can see, I think the political climate is pretty clear. The environmental stuff going on is pretty clear. This detachment is not sustainable, and we need to take responsibility for ourselves again. And also, reality now is overlaid. One of the biggest things, which we'll get to in the Bwiti tradition, is to know what's real. I'll tell you later that it's about the study of life. And as all of you are probably aware, with AI, with all of these things, it's becoming blurred. It's harder and harder to recognize what's real in our world. So the question about how we got here, I think the best, you can skip ahead to the best kind of metaphor that we have, and to stick to trees, because Iboga is a tree, the tree of knowledge. And everyone's familiar with the story of Adam and Eve, I assume, right? We're in America, yeah. But yeah, so I think it's a perfect metaphor for where we went wrong. The apple from the tree of knowledge essentially led us on a different path. The minute we chose to be inside of the mind and instead of our hearts, and instead of in the present moment and in nature, that's when everything got disconnected, because we're initially connected. And so we talk a lot about at the fire about ancestors, and our ancestors are the ones that thought they could do better than that. They needed to change something. So that's kind of what the mind does. It's, it deduces and, labels and classifies things and cuts things up. And when you're in the mind, the next kind of, the way you're going to relate to the world is in this kind of cutting type of way. And you can trace this a little bit further from, the story of Adam and Eve all the way up to Descartes and what I call the Cartesian knife. I think he was a pivotal figure in profound philosophical shift, metaphorically what I said is the Cartesian knife, when he said, "I think, therefore I am." It was almost as though he took the apple from the tree of knowledge and just took a bite and then set us on our course. What it caused, as you can see here, is it prioritized the mind over the body. And for those of you that are familiar, he said, how do you actually say it in cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And a lot of philosophy and medical philosophy, even everything, is based on this now. We have a mechanistic view of nature and the body, a fragmentation of health, Western medical superiority, which means that we're now, a lot of like what medicine was before we started deducing and breaking these things down was there was a spiritual element, there was a body element. We looked at things holistically. And now we break it up into specialties and different parts. And we do that with everything. We're cutting everything to pieces. It's an over-objective view of data. And so, as we know, like every single person is different. And I think that's the next slide, but not yet. Every person is different, and it's like we have all these studies that we like to quote and all of these things from science, but actually, what did that person eat today? Everybody ate something different. What is their background? What is their life? Where do they come from? These are all questions that should be asked if you're talking especially about mental health, and things like that. But that's not how we do things now, and that's because we're stuck in the mind, this dissecting, cutting place. In Bwiti, we actually say that the mind is a tool, and it's a knife, actually, and that it's a tool for you to use, but you have to be careful with it. And so I'm not trashing the mind altogether. I live up there a lot all the time. But we need to change our relationship to the mind. And that's where this comes in. So, I think it's time we drop this metaphorically drop this poisonous wax preservative-laden apples from the tree of knowledge. Those ideas and systems that separate and reduce, and instead eat more from the dirty, earthy roots of the tree of life. This means seeking wisdom that is grounded, ancient, and connected to the very essence of life itself. In my use of this old metaphor, the tree of life is certainly the Tabernantha boga shrub of Central West Africa, and its true fruits are not the lofty apples from above, but rather the inner root bark of its roots beneath the ground. All right, so how many of you guys know of ibogaine? And how many of you knew of iboga? You knew of both, and that they're different? Yeah, so essentially, in the work that I do, a lot of times people talk about them interchangeably. So if I'm going to talk about what iboga is, I think the first thing to do is to tell you what it's not, and that's ibogaine. A lot of the hype and stuff that's going on around out there is related to ibogaine, and a lot of the good research is also related to ibogaine. But iboga is something different. And another thing is, it's just one alkaloid out of many. We've observed at least 30 plus alkaloids within iboga, and many of them have been tested. And in our talk, and studied and researched. And in our talk yesterday, we gave away kind of the research articles, so if any of you guys want those, I can give those to you as well. But essentially, we've tested all the different alkaloids, and a lot of them have been proven to be more effective than ibogaine at treating addiction, cocaine addiction in rats, and some of them have been proven to be cardioprotective and things like that. So we essentially have this like perfect recipe with iboga, and then we take out a single alkaloid. It's the same line of thinking, the same cutting, the same dualistic idea. And it's a tendency that we have. It's separating, reducing complex systems. And we see that all around psychiatry, medical breakthroughs, everything. So it's not all bad. But this is a chance to learn from holistic wisdom of traditions like Bwiti, to question our ingrained dualistic thinking and to explore whether a more integrated approach, one that honors the innate interconnectedness of body, spirit, and nature, could guide us towards a more authentic life. So from the Bwiti perspective, ibogaine is devoid of the spirit of iboga. But Sarah who's here, took ibogaine and had a spiritual experience. It's not to say that there isn't a spiritual experience with iboga. It's just one piece, though. And when you have the full spirit of the medicine there, it's something completely different. It's like taking the wisdom out of it. So now we can talk about what iboga is and kind of how it works. Iboga is the inner root bark of the Tabernantha boga shrub. It's rich in many alkaloids, like I said before, and it has the spirit of the medicine. It comes from Central West Africa. It was originally found in southern Gabon by the Babango people. They're also known as the pygmies, but Babango is their actual, what they're called. It's a derogatory term to call them pygmies. And they're some of humans' earliest ancestors. So this is a very old tradition and a very old medicine. It's probably the first plant medicine ever. So, sorry, hold on. So this brings us to kind of the heart of the discussion. You know, if you have questions about Iboga, we can ask at the end, but I really want to talk more about the Bwiti tradition. Oh yeah, that's, you know, essentially Iboga and Ibogaine, what I'm saying here is that we can learn a lot from how we've dissected Ibogaine out from Iboga and use it as a mirror to look at how we treat medical and life and conditions. So we deduce everything down to one piece. And the way that Iboga works is by reconnecting us to life. So this is also how the tradition works, which we'll get into in a sec. It brings you back to the root of who you are, sets you free from conditioned patterns and behaviors, and unearths you, revealing what was already there by using the truth to set you free. So essentially, once we get into the Bwiti tradition stuff, you'll really understand what I'm talking about, but there's this idea that we're all broken and we all need to be fixed. And a lot of that comes from like just our culture and our pattern behaviors of like original sin, all sorts of stuff. But in Bwiti, we know that everybody's perfect and everybody's already good. And the problem that we need to fix is that we think there's something that we need to fix. Nice. All right. So, the Bwiti tradition was born from this deep connection with life and nature. It offers profound and often surprising simple teachings that can help guide us back towards a sense of wholeness and connection, to bring us home to ourselves. Let's explore a couple of these core principles. The Bwiti tradition is also not a religion. They would actually really hate for it to be called that, but rather a traditional spiritual path that is the study of life itself. They do not work towards developing more beliefs in the intellect, but rather to know things, which I'll touch more on later. Let's start with the root of our disconnection problem from the Bwiti lens. Let's consider our relationship to nature. The Bwiti tradition often offers a profound and simple teaching regarding nature. And it basically goes like this. And so basically in the Bwiti, we have a bunch of like pithy, short things to say, and it's actually perfect because it helps you remember it throughout the day. But this one's probably the longest. And it says, nature is here for you to use and enjoy. Use it, don't abuse it. If you abuse it, you get misery. Yep, it's the longest one. But the key point here is, I think this is at the root of where we went wrong. The idea is, nature is perfect. To them, they know that it's perfect. That's why they're still exactly where we began as humans. I actually went to a village in southern Gabon, and I had this crazy experience because I was in a place that I realized humans had probably been there the longest that we've ever been in a place. And what I saw was jungle and a few wooden buildings and the temple. But I had just come from Portugal, and there were overlays of people in Portugal. In Lisbon where we were, in Sintra, there was multiple different cultures all throughout time that have conquered that area and taken over. There's Roman ruins, all sorts of stuff. And so it really stuck with me as I looked around. I was like, oh damn, I don't even notice the human trace. And that's because they didn't need to change it. They knew that they had everything that they need right there. And they stayed exactly where they belonged, and they're happy. And they have abundant lives. But as I said before, our ancestors thought that they could do better than perfect. Our ancestors, somewhere down the line, said, what about air conditioning? What about this? And I think that's at the core of where we went wrong. It's a perspective. It's how we see the world. Thinking we could do better than nature is a subtle but powerful idea. The notion of that human intellect or intervention can somehow improve upon the inherent perfection of natural systems. This is why a lot of us, what also is included in this teaching, which I didn't get to yet, is that we're part of nature too. And the way that we treat the external world as though it's something we need to fix and improve upon constantly is also how we treat ourselves. Can anybody relate to that? I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of what our mind's doing all the time, right? We're like scanning everything, looking for, oh, how are they reading us? How's this happening? And we're just adapting to everything from that place, trying to perfect ourselves or make ourselves different. But in Bwiti, which is a teaching I'll get to later, we know that you need to just be. And that's how you reconnect to nature, and that's how you be who you are. Because nature is natural. So we just need to let it be. So really the other kind of one of my favorite Bwiti teachings, and what we tell our guests and stuff, this is like the point of our retreats. Everybody has like reasons that they come. A lot of times it's, even like physical things like traumatic brain injuries. But really the whole point of our retreat is so that they can know who they are. And the whole purpose of the whole process is to unearth that. We have to find that person in there. And a lot of it is just cultural overlay, all these things that we've picked up. So in order to kind of highlight, this Bwiti teaching of knowing who you are, I usually like to tell a story. It's kind of hard being stuck to this microphone. Can you guys hear me when I go back at all?
Do you want a wireless microphone?
It's okay. I usually like to move around though. But yeah, so I'm going to tell you guys a story. I call it the elephant story. So I used to live in Thailand. We actually had a center there that we're reopening in August, but way, way before that, I was practicing Buddhism there and living there at the time. And I used to go up to this place called Pai in the mountains to do meditation retreats, like personal meditation retreats. And I realized early on in my life, or early on in my meditation career, that I was also doing this kind of deduction and this separation that I'm talking about with my practice. I realized that I was sitting down on the cushion and then going into my life. And those were two totally different Ryans at the time. I wasn't present over here, and I was forcing presence over here. And so what I started to do in my meditation retreats was to carry it along with me. So I would be like, okay, I'm on retreat for these 10 days, but everything I do, I'm meditating. And I would do fun things still, like drive a motorcycle throughout Pai was the main thing that I did. And I would purposefully get lost and drive around. It's like one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. And it's kind of like cheating for meditation because you're not really distracted when you're looking at all of that. But every time that I would go back to my meditation retreat, I had to pass by this camp of elephants that were in a literal like wooden cage, like just probably double the size of this, like just enough for their bodies. And they would be lined up like that. And every time I passed it, I'd be like, motherfucker. I was like all blissed out driving on the thing. And then I see this and it would just make me sad. And it would affect the rest of my retreat. And then I just worked with sadness. But one day I was driving around and I passed by the same area. I had a beautiful day. And I saw an elephant in the middle of the road. And I saw that the cage was broken. And so I pulled over and parked the bike. And then I looked over. I didn't want to blow up its spot or let anyone know. So I hid behind a tree, took a few pictures, and watched. And it was running down the road. It got up to the grass, and then it got onto the grass, and then it got to the edge of the jungle, and it froze. And it just stood there. And that was a very impactful moment in my life. I still get chills because I watched that elephant stand at the edge of the jungle, freshly freed, and he was terrified. I realized that he was scared. And I could only watch for so long, and I eventually left and went back to my meditation retreat. And what happened is that was on my mind the whole time. I was like, how the hell, that big animal that comes from the jungle, how did it get to the point where it's afraid of where it comes from, its own place? And I was like, it doesn't know what it is. It's totally confused. And then I was like, oh shit, what about me? How do we know who we are, How am I like that? And it really got me thinking. And this was before I knew Bwiti or any of this stuff. And I realized they don't capture full-grown elephants, and then they keep them in a cage. They start when they're little, and they have a mahout, who actually they have a really cool relationship with the whole time. But the mahout stays on their back, training them constantly, training them to not believe that they're an elephant. And that's how you get to the point where they are now. Do you think that relates to us at all? You know? It's crazy. I was like, oh shit, well, maybe it was good that I was a bad student in school. Maybe it was good that I was an at-risk teen and kicked out of everything. Because, you know, our society is not us. You know? What our parents told us is not us. You know? All of these things of the mind, it's just a continuance, right? It's being passed down from generation to generation, and we're just being trained. You know, and we mean well, and we need to learn how to eat and do simple basic things and how to love and all of the things of life that our parents teach us. But at a certain point, we have to realize that life is about being us, about being who we are. And so, what do you think we are? Can anyone guess? Sorry, I'm used to engagement. Someone say something. Nobody? You should know. Creators. Okay, good. Yeah, we're creators, according to Bwiti. So what do you think that means?
We create our reality.
How?
I think this
Perspective, we'll say, yeah. Yeah, thoughts too.
world and bring them down into visible form.
The what?
Take things from from our imaginal world, and we bring those down, and then bring them to visible reality.
Yeah. Well, where does the imaginal world start?
Collected to all of us.
With us, who we are. Even the imaginal realm we're creating. So it's this part of you that's behind the thoughts, right? There's a part of you that can know that you're thinking, right? I mean, you could test it. You could observe yourself thinking, so obviously that's not you. So there's a deeper us than to the mind, and that's what creates. And actually, our minds are usually so run amok that it's like crazy to think that we can take control of it again. But that's actually possible. You know, I don't think control is the best route for Westerners. I think it's probably much better for us to do a relaxed approach. But in Bwiti, they're very serious about controlling the mind. But we're type A. We take it too far.
What's an example
Of what?
of like,
Being a creator or the mind?
or no, how they control compared to like,
Well, they use the Bwiti teachings, which I'm going to keep sharing, but essentially, like, they live this. So it's a tradition. It's not a religion, like I said. So like, it's not like dogmatic. But what they do is they say these pithy terms to each other all the time, and they always relate back to these Bwiti teachings, and so that's how their mind gets controlled. But in the more pointed answer in the Bwiti tradition, I don't have slides for this, but they call it Mr. and Mrs. Choice. And they would say that every moment you have a choice. And even if like you're caught, like sometimes I say this to guests at retreat when they'll be caught in a cyclical loop, like thought loops, thinking about the same thing over and over again. And then we all tend to be really hard on ourselves. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles in retreat is the way that we treat ourselves when we do something wrong, right? Or when we make a mistake. But what I tell them is that that's a moment that should be celebrated, right? Because how do we learn? We learn when we notice. And so you start there, and it's a key. You change the relationship to how you relate to your own mind, to how you relate to experience, and you fix that first, because then it can become problematic, and then you just take responsibility for your choices. And you don't have to make all your choices in one moment. You just have to make one. Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you for that. Next one. All right, so this is my favorite Bwiti teaching, and it's because it has the entire tradition, everything about life, all of the truth in just 2 words. That's all you need to know, actually. So we can just leave now. Just kidding. I say that in retreat, and some people are like, actually, because it's like right about to be taking medicine time, so they're like ready to go. Hold on. So what do you think it means to just be? And how does that relate to kind of what I'm talking about right now? It's essentially how we relate to experience, right? So this idea of perspective. So how do you think what do you think the perspective of just being is? Can anyone guess?
Where with your senses?
Ooh, good. You're ahead. That's great. Yeah.
Noticing a thought and then letting it go.
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, it's acceptance of reality. It's allowing it, appreciating it, and not changing it. And that doesn't mean you don't do things, right? And then we don't work and change things and adapt things, but it's about how we relate to those things, right? So instead of relating it to it in this Descartes kind of way that I mentioned before, and this very scientific Western cutting it up and trying to make it better and improve it, we appreciate it. And you'd be amazed at how far that can go. And also, though, the most important thing with this teaching, though, is how we relate to ourselves. You being yourself is peak. That's it in Bwiti, I swear, they're so proud of themselves. This is something we all need to learn. And I joke about it at the fire, but they literally have t-shirts. They know how to make t-shirts now. They have the screen printing thing, and they have t-shirts of themselves that they wear. And that taught me a lot, because it's wow, we're way far from that. You know what I mean? How would that be received here? But yeah, I can show you pictures later if you want. It's hilarious. All right, so next teaching, because I want to get to kind of an exchange here, is our second favorite teaching. I don't know if some of you guys saw the shirts we were giving out yesterday, but we have more, and we have it on there. It's everything is nothing until you make it something. So it's sticking to this kind of perspective theme, right? This idea of accepting what's natural and then accepting the fact of who we are, which is what? Creators. But yeah, that's it too. Yeah, so what does it mean, everything is nothing until you make it something? It means that we create literally our entire world, right? And at the fire sometimes, I'll be super brief because I'm sure some of you have heard of this, but have you ever heard the rat park experiment? Where they were, basically I'll sum it up super fast, but there were these rats that were addicted to cocaine in the study, they were doing a study in Chicago, keeping them addicted to cocaine, and the rats would do it until they died, basically. They would never stop using the cocaine. But then the scientist came along and was like, wait, I would too if I lived in this environment that they live in. Because it was just these crappy cages stacked on top of each other. I mean, basically like a jail cell for rats. And what else do they have to do? They have nothing else to do. And so he did an experiment, and he created a beautiful rat park. And in that park, he had all the little play things for them and all the things that rats like. And what happened, do you think? Yeah. It's that simple, guys. And you know what's even crazier, though, for us, is we're the ones that create our experience. So all we have to do is change what we're creating. How do you think we change that? Yep. And, again, it's whatever you want, This idea also that there's right and wrong and stuff, obviously there is, but we can get so tripped up on that. Whatever makes you happy, whatever you love, and Bwiti, go for it. That's what we say, because it's, to them, every person's an expression, their own unique expression, and that's part of the perfect nature. So you need to just be you. And then, so on the next slide, I think I'll read this for you because it's in French, and I don't know if you can see what's on the screen. Hold on one sec before you play it. Yeah, perfect. Gabon. Actually, so if you're talking about Bwiti, it's actually pronounced Bwiti, by the way, but everyone says Bwiti now, so. But it originated in southern Gabon, central West Africa. If you look at the equator and just follow it to Africa, on the edge there, on the western edge, it's right there. Our village is actually on the equator in Gabon. It's beautiful. What's that? Yeah. Oh, I mean, just to talk about Gabon, Gabon's a magical place. They say it's like the Tibet of Africa. And it's amazing to go there because it's this place where I said, they're still living like they did, we did, for a very long time. And they still have the community and stuff like that. But on the last slide, I'll talk a little bit about how that's starting to change and kind of the effect that the outside world is having on that. But yeah, they're still living Bwiti, eating boga all the time, loving life. Yeah, like mostly. I mean, yeah, like usually people go there in like retreats or on like safaris and things like that. It's kind of a tough place to just go on vacation. You'd probably have to like plan. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I can help you with that if you ever did want to. All right, so this slide kind of touches on why, when I said like Bwiti is not a religion, it's a traditional spiritual path. That's what I mean, and it's all about the art of knowing and studying life itself. So I asked this guy, Manima, who's one of my spiritual older brothers, you can pause it for a sec. What Bwiti, go back. That's all right. What Bwiti meant to him. What was the most important thing that Bwiti taught him? And that was my first question, and he was like, and so here's what he said, and I'll read it to you because it's tough. He said, after having spent a lot of time into Bwiti, in the school of life that is Bwiti, I can say it did help me to discover myself. It helped me to define myself, to know myself and to be in harmony with myself. Finally, living in what I was not before, living in the true reality of life. Today I can say that I live in the reality because I understand better what is going on and because I know I have enough judgment to make a distinction between what is real and what is fake. I know how to tell what is true and what is good for me and to see what is not good for me. And the Bwiti taught me that. Base. So, that's what this guy lives, this tradition, lives all of this, and that's what he says is the most important thing, to know what's real. And obviously, today in our world, that's growing harder and harder, to tell what's real in our own minds, to tell what's ours, what isn't, where it comes from, and just, even just in our work and everything we do. So essentially, I just want to talk about one last Bwiti teaching before we get into the last slide. And this is about how we know things. Can anyone guess based on this slide what? Yes, exactly. What is the sixth sense? But they actually say it's the first sense in Bwiti. Yep. That's a dangerous one, though. In the West, we don't have much practice with that one, so they say to focus on the other senses first for us, and then add that one if you can. But essentially, the only way to know what's real is through direct experience. Everything else is a belief, and they call it that, and they know that. So that's why they disarm it from the beginning. They do not get caught up in other people's ideas or other things outside or in their mind. It's just what's there, what's directly experiencing. And the only way we experience things is through our senses. So that's the only thing we can trust. It can also be an amazing anchor, right? Like if you catch yourself another way, if you catch yourself in your mind too much, just pick a sense. Connect to that sense. And you'll be present again. Because when you're in your senses, you're in direct experience with the world. And in Bwiti, it was funny, someone was talking about enlightenment to the shaman, and they asked him, what do you think enlightenment is? And he's like, I know what it is. He's like, it's when your senses are aligned. When you're completely in all of your senses, directly experiencing life. So do you guys have any questions about Bwiti or Boga before I move on to the next? You do?
Well, I was just wondering if you could say more about Bwiti being the language of the Boga.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for that layout. What do you think that means? Bwiti is the language of Iboga. We talked about it in the workshop yesterday, but essentially Bwiti is the language of Iboga because it comes from Iboga itself. So when they originally found the tradition, it's kind of silly. Literally yesterday, I swear, Sarah and I were driving and a porcupine ran across the road as we were leaving here, and she had to protect it and help it get across the road. That's actually how the Bwiti found Iboga. was they ate a porcupine and it started this whole process. So it was very funny. But from that point on, so Bwiti was before Iboga. Like they were studying life, they wanted to know how the world works. Like all of these ideas were kind of slightly there, but they were confused. And so when they finally found Iboga through this porcupine, they actually realized oh, this is it. And Iboga came to them actually and said, I've seen you guys looking around, asking questions, trying to figure all this stuff out. Just eat me and I'll help you. Ask me questions and I'll answer them. And actually in retreat, that's how we have people prepare. We have them write down questions. It can be very practical ones like, is this job right for me? Is this relationship right for me? And it can be very deep, personal ones. And all of those, it's perfect because that's what Iboga loves to do. It loves to answer questions for you because it knows there's one truth anyway. And it likes to watch you squirm in the process. I'm just kidding. What? Just be. Any other questions? Because I'm going to go on to kind of where we're at today with everything. All right, so there's some stuff going on now with Bwiti. Obviously, there's been a lot of podcasts and a lot of things that have happened, mostly around ibogaine, right? So there's a ton of interest. And people see a power there, They see something that can be capitalized on and made into just another Western thing, right? And so on the outside from where we are, unfortunately, they're very calculated, these people, and they use terms and things that make us feel like we're doing something right. So however well-intentioned we are, we need to check ourselves and see where we might be actually wrong. And so how many of you know what reciprocity means, or sustainability? You definitely know that. Yeah, so reciprocity is this idea that you give back to the communities where things come from. And there was actually a Nagoya Protocol thing that got signed in Gabon, stating that basically they would receive benefits from ibogaine and iboga, in the outside world because that's where it came from and they're the shepherds of it. That sounds really good, right? It also sounds like a perfect tool for the bad guys to use. And that's what's happening right now. There's some organizations out there that are raising millions and millions of dollars on funding to essentially say that, because they say iboga is becoming endangered, which is factually false, and they're using that money to they're buying up personal properties, to be honest, but they're also creating farms for iboga and trying to create this whole Western ecosystem there, right? So their solution is, you guys don't know how to sustain things, so we're going to come in here and we're going to teach you how to do it our way, which seems to be working out great, and then you guys will be okay. So we're going to come in here, white saviors, and save you. But the truth is that iboga has been sustainable when in Bwiti hands forever. And that's because they know exactly what to do. The iboga that we work with comes from plants where they only take a third of the root structure every 5 years, and it's all wild iboga, and they survey and they know exactly where it is. And so that maintains all of this. And we come in and just taint everything. And so that also brings me to the experience, because what you said before about Gabon, they're still living like this. Another thing that I've noticed is the Western influence. It's a chance and a place where I got to see kind of all the colonial stuff that we know from history, from before. It's very new there, so it's happening in real time. And there's churches popping up all over, and I'm not trashing Christianity. I'm just saying that that's usually what we do. We send in that, and then then it's infrastructure. And you can see the Chinese primarily, and French, obviously. It was a French colony for a long time. It's now slightly independent. And they actually just had a coup, and it seems pretty good. There's a new leader that's from the Gabonese military. But the Chinese and the French have been extracting resources there for a long time. And one of the things you'll see when you go there is constant trucks of just old trees coming down. And it's depressing. So I want to say that, it sucks because they don't know how to relate to these things. Someone comes in and they're like, hey, I'm going to build a water infrastructure and build all of these things. And oh, by the way, we're just going to chop down some trees or, do some of that stuff. And when you need, better water infrastructure and all of that stuff, it sounds great. So we just need to be very careful, I think, first of all, on our side of things and how we checking ourselves and how we relate to these kinds of cultures where we think we know better. I mean, it kind of ties into that Western superiority complex thing with like medical traditions and Bwiti being a more spiritual tradition, animist tradition, and thinking that one of them is better. And then lastly, I think it's worth calling out right here, like, we need to be very careful about the language that we're using too. And I swear this is true. Some of these organizations that are coming in, basically, again, so they're raising the money and they're trying to create permits and licenses to buy and sell iboga to people that are illiterate mostly. So, and they're only picking a few select people who they trust and work with that they're gonna build the farms for, and they leave everyone else out. And that would be bad, but at the same time, they use insane language. They call it poaching. Anybody that's not like licensed, which all of these words have like a big historical significance too of how they've been used for harm. And they say poaching, they call it boga sold on the black market, and I'll proudly say that the boga I work with is from the black market. And they called it Gabon's blood diamond even at one point, which if you've been to Gabon, that's very silly, because that's not a place where that kind of stuff is happening, you know what I mean? And so I think it's important because nobody's talking about this, and we care about reciprocity and sustainability, and we do it, the way we do it with the village we work with is we're helping them to create their own, like they're telling us what they need, which is a tractor to cut down the trees so that they can build their own houses, and we're saving up money to get them a tractor so that they can have it. And so that's how we work with them, but we also need to be very careful about how we influence the cultures as well. Yeah, okay. Does anyone have any questions? Come on. This is how we're supposed to do it. Probably a year total. I've been back 8 times, but yeah. I was just there in January, but I was only there for like a quick trip.
How did you initially connecting with?
Well, actually, yeah, I mean, I can talk about that a little bit because it kind of touches on the importance of the tradition. So the first time I took iboga TA on my own, which TA stands for total alkaloid extract. It's, again, like a very Western thing to do. I wanted the strongest iboga for me to take on my own. I have a history of drug and alcohol use, and so I think that kind of fed into that. And so I did it on my own. I was actually living in Thailand then too, and I had the most profound experience of my life up until that point. But then, 6 months later, and I was like tapped in. I definitely overdosed myself, by the way, too, because there's this thing where you like kind of see lights at night, and I had that for a month afterwards. Usually it's like 2 days. But when it wore off and everything wore off, I didn't have the tools that I needed, And so I fell back into drug and alcohol addiction, eventually had a mental breakdown, all of this stuff that eventually led me coming back to iboga. And this time I went to Gabon. And when I went to Gabon and I did it with the tradition, I got it, and I've been obsessed ever since. I mean, I've been doing like 2 to 3 retreats, training, everything ever since that moment, because it's so beautiful when you do things like that the right way and when you connect in that way. So yeah, I mean, that's what, when Sarah said like Bwiti is the language of iboga, that's like what that means. It's like, oh shit, now I get it. And you know what the reason it's good is because it also has all the tools for you to keep it going. So like that's why in retreat, one of the things we say is like, we're gonna immerse you in this tradition. We need to make sure that it sticks, right? And so the whole retreat, we're talking about it constantly and at the fire, and it's helping people in retreat. But what's crazy is when they go home, they have all the integration tools that they need for themselves. They're totally empowered and not relying on anyone because they have the tradition embedded in them. And we still do integration calls and stuff like that, but really, honestly, all it is reminding them again, oh, well, do you remember this? This is the tradition. And it's great because people have it. And when you have that, and iboga gives you like a total reset, by the way. It resets like all of your neurotransmitters, A lot of the research you can find is on ibogaine doing that, but iboga does it as well. And basically, like, that's why it works so well for addiction, you know? And actually even Parkinson's disease because of the dopamine receptors. And so it totally resets you physically, spiritually, and mentally. And then you have this opportunity with choices to build a whole new life as a creator. And that's the biggest gift iboga has for all of us, is connecting you to you so that you know who you are and what you want. But it comes with responsibility. So I went to Gabon, you know, and did the ceremony, but I also did an initiation. And in Gabon, that's how they primarily use iboga, you know, like if you're gonna join, like when you get to a certain age and you're ready to join the tradition, and they see that you're ready to become an adult, you will take iboga. Like the last president took iboga, by the way, and iboga is the national treasure in Gabon. So it's like everyone kind of does an initiation at some point. But the point of it is that they do the initiation when they're ready to take responsibility for their lives. That's what being an adult is. And so the iboga kind of jumpstarts that for them and gives them all the tools. It clears them, here's your fresh start, here's where all those patterns came from. Oh, yep, it's your parents, no, usually. And then it's you, just you and you. And you know, with the Bwiti tradition, you can build a beautiful life. And building a beautiful life actually should take that back, because it's not about building it, it's about being it.
If it resets the neurotransmitters in your brain, how does it interact with psilocybin or previous psilocybin use?
Do you mean taking it at the same time? No. Okay. Yeah, no, it wouldn't be. It would be a war going on inside your head. Yes, so that's a really great question, though, because, you know, I mean, most intake calls, I mean, these days how many of you have not done psilocybin in this room? Okay, well, I knew that was better to ask that way in this crowd, so. But no, I mean, most people have done psychedelics and stuff that we work with, and all of them, you know? But what I'd say is we usually try to make sure that they have some time, you know, like a couple months or something to, you know, really prepare, and that's when we start working. Usually from the time we talk to them and start working with them, it's not a physical concern or whatever. There is, you know, it would be contraindicated if you took them at the same time, but the half-life of, you know, psilocybin, like all of that stuff, you'd be fine even if it was just a few days. But yeah, really it's a spiritual and kind of mental thing, you know? So like you want your mind to be kind of prepped for iboga and clear, just so it's an easier experience for you. Iboga will do the job anyway, but you want to make it a little easier because it's easier on you.
Is there anybody who shouldn't be taking them?
Yes, good question. So there are safety considerations with ibogaine and iboga. It does, you know, block the potassium ion channel of your heart, which sounds really brutal, but what that means is it just slows your QT interval. So there's a bigger gap between the electrical signals of your heart. A lot of things do that. You know, grapefruit juice does that, quinine, and so with that in mind, you know, that's one of the examples. And then obviously with like psychiatric medications and SSRIs and things like that, there can be obvious contraindications there with like serotonin syndrome and things like that. So it kind of has to do with all of that. But, you know, essentially, you know, like the most contraindicated thing is just medications, heart conditions. It's always like a pre-existing heart condition, or maybe some liver problem, like some sort of liver problem. But I mean, you screen for it, we screen for it, and we've been doing it for years, and once people pass that screening process, it's safe.
History of like family, paranoid schizophrenia, any like, you know, because they say that you shouldn't be doing psychedelics or you have any particular things that seem to.
If they call me themselves, I say, come on down. If the person that has the condition, like schizophrenia or whatever it is, calls themselves and asks and is serious and wants the help, we say, come on down, because it isn't actually contraindicated in that way. I mean, after we assess them, obviously we would ask questions and see where they're at. But if the person is ready, iboga can help with that too. All of these pathologized conditions, it can really help with. The key point, though, and the reason I said if they call themselves, is usually with those types of situations, it's a family member that's calling for them. And we will never work with someone who's not making the call themselves. because this is and then the whole point of our intake process really, outside of the medical screening, is making sure that the person's ready. Because this isn't a medicine that we, first of all, want to give to people that aren't ready because it just makes our job hard. But it also takes away from the other guests. So at our retreat, every single person is serious. And that makes like a hugely supportive container. And just to give you an example, like I think I said this yesterday, but like we've worked with like really high level cases, like really difficult cases, treatment-resistant depression, where the Norwegian government was about to give him assisted suicide, and he came to our Portugal retreat. And we had him come for 2 retreats, but after the first ceremony of the second retreat, he left early because he was so excited to get back to his students. He taught computers and his girlfriend and tell her that he loved her and that he's sorry. And earlier, you know how I said questions? This was a guy who all of his questions were about ways he should kill himself. Like that's how dark it was, And so it's not really about that. Actually, Iboga works better for people that are at rock bottom. Because if you meet this medicine from a humble place, it's a lot easier for it to show you the truth. Because what gets in the way of the truth? Exactly. Well, our domes.
That was like a family history, like for.
Yeah, that's fine.
My dad was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Would that have any effect on me being able to do it as a midwife?
Not with us. It would have everything to do with our conversation. Yeah.
I'm really curious on the structure of the ceremonies, if there's certain songs, certain instruments.
Yeah. So thank you for asking that. I didn't want to get too deep into that, but yeah, the other, so basically you say you can't have a boga without Bwiti, Bwiti without a boga. And actually you can't have it without the music either. And so we laughed about it yesterday. I can't play the instruments, so I'll just say that. So I recorded a lot of the audio that we use and stuff like that. I mean, I have the instruments there, but it would ruin your experience if I did it. But the music's incredibly important, and actually there's a lot of cool science behind it even. There's a scientific study that showed that it's effectively like binaural beats causing a theta state, and it's also cardioprotective. And the type of instruments that they use are really interesting too, because it's like a kind of like a mouth bow. It's called a mugango. And it must have been when they were hunting, and then just started making noises with their bow and arrow, honestly, because it's that. And then there's a stick, and they move their mouth, and it echoes off their mouth, and that's what makes the noise. And it's funny, like, we can tell where someone's at in retreat based on how they respond to the music. Because a lot of people, have trouble with the music when they're really struggling, and then when they love the music, they're connecting. So it can be very abrasive at first. There's even one particular song that we call the Chiseler. And it's because one guy said he had this experience every time, it's like, and he felt it chiseling at his mind the whole time, until finally there was just a little plug, and then he went, and he was great after that. And then he loved the Chiseler.
Is there a place where we can access these songs?
Yeah, for sure, we can share them with you. Yeah, if you remind me after. Yeah, anyone. There's songs on Spotify, YouTube, yeah, there's tons now.
What's the duration of the experience and kind of an abstracted kind of idea of like what you're going through? Obviously, each situation is.
Great question. Yeah, so this is another thing that's like, this is why, Boga's a long experience. And it's a real one, it works, but it's, essentially the ceremony's in 2 different phases. There's really 3 phases, but 2 core phases before you go to sleep. And so, we usually start the ceremony at like 9 p.m., and we're around the fire, and we start talking about the tradition, and then we eat medicine around there. And then you'll go lay down in the ceremony space at some point. You'll know when it's the time, and we'll know. And then we'll help you there, and you lay down, because it causes ataxia too, so you can't move like you normally do. And then you'll lay down in the ceremony space until sunrise. And that's where the music's playing, and we kind of work with you a little bit. And then at sunrise, you go back to your room, and it's what we call processing day. But this is actually, in my opinion, the most important part of the experience. And a lot of people write this off. Like a lot of centers and stuff like that just let people, oh, you're done, ceremony's over. But I know that that's when the juice, like when the real stuff happens. That's when all the epiphanies come to the surface. And the biggest and most important thing of that part of the process is that you don't get distracted. So all you have to do is lay there in your room or walk around outside, but just not distract yourself, which sounds incredibly easy. But some people call it the longest day of their life. So it can be as easy as you want it to be, but that's the whole point of processing days, to get to the point where it becomes easy. And it shows you. Iboga teaches experientially. It wants to make sure you learn. It doesn't want you to go home. Like, if it just healed everything for you, which, by the way, none of these plant medicines do that. They always show you. But Iboga is really serious about making sure that you learn and you know. Because, again, Bwiti is about knowing, not believing. And so experientially is like dredging up everything that you've stored in your body on processing day. I use this terminology because it also helps us to screen a little bit on our end, dredging. But then, then when you feel it on its way out, you know where it came from. And then that night you'll go to sleep, and then the next day you'll still feel the effects a little bit, and when you get up to go to the bathroom, you'll see those lights kind of like I was talking about. But, you're like, it's like a normal day again. So that's kind of the breaking point. But the whole retreat is a process. So we have 2 ceremonies in retreat, because the first one's like a mental and physical detox mostly, and then the second one allows you to go deeper. And so we just want to make sure that people aren't, it's not like 2 separate ceremonies, it's a whole process when you show up and then when you leave. So it's a 6 or 7 day process. Yeah. Yeah.
What makes you hesitant to say that this is a sort of religion and religious tradition?
What are religions built on? Yeah, that's why. Because this isn't about you needing anything. This isn't about you needing to go to a person to tell you what's up. It's about you knowing you and how to relate to the world to maintain that and be in the world naturally with yourself. So they see religions as a bunch of books of beliefs and ideas of other people telling them shit that they shouldn't do and all of that stuff. And they say that about books even. They won't read books. They don't want to take in other people's ideas. They want their own direct experience.
So is Iboga something, I missed the workshop yesterday. Is it something you take once, so you have one ceremony where you have 2 sessions, or is it something you do every year or every month, or how do they use it?
I mean, essentially, our goal in retreat is for you to come for one retreat, and it usually is that, it's like 90% of the time. Usually, like I said this yesterday, but usually when people come back, it's when they have a huge life event or they need it like a lot. So there's different ways you can work with the medicine too. So there's like the healing, obvious kind of way, which is what our retreats are focused on. But then there's also like spiritual discovery is what they call it in translation. And that's like when you're coming to it from a different place and can work with it in a different way. And I do pre-initiations, like I've been authorized to do that on this side of the world. And that's like a totally different experience, like totally focused on kind of like the same thing as the initiation in Gabon. And then, when people do come back, again, it's like life events, or some people, it didn't click and they still need to.
And for the initiation, that decides that, is there a council or a general idea, or is it something that?
I love that you use the word council. Yeah. And this isn't to attack you or anything, but they don't know councils. This is a perfect example of our Western minds relating to Gabon, because that's also what's happening with these people that are trying to control the medicine, is they're creating these false councils and all of these things that sound super important, and nobody goes to Gabon or really talks to anyone there, so they just think they're telling the truth. But I'm empowered by our shaman. It's called Nima there, and the village that we work with. And yeah, we work with one village, essentially. What?
I was just going to say, people are initiated.
You can come, Sarah works with me.
Just people are initiated when they're ready.
Yeah, when they're ready. Yeah.
How does it compare to ayahuasca, the experience?
I've never heard that question before. I'm just kidding. No. I answer that every day. It's all good. Yeah. So I mean, I'd say, I don't have a lot of experience with ayahuasca, only DMT and things like that. But I have a lot of guests that come that have done a lot of ayahuasca. And they all tell me how different it is and how correct this is. But I mean, you could look at the structure, right? Ayahuasca is a vine, like from above. Iboga is a root in the ground, right? And so ayahuasca is teaching you, like the actual ayahuasca spirit is teaching you, right? I mean, that's what people have explained it to me as. And so it's coming from this external source that's teaching you in that way. Iboga is the opposite of that. It's a mirror. So it's just teaching you by showing you you. So everything that's happening, it's like you manifesting, you doing this, your pattern behaviors, all of those things. And that's all it does. Is it shows you how your mind works, essentially. It shows you who you are. But it starts by showing you how your mind works because you can't get to who you are until you clear all that shit out. So yeah, it's very, very different, and it's experientially very different too. Like the classification of Iboga as a psychedelic it's weird. It's really hard to classify it. It lightly works on the 5-HT2A serotonin receptor, which most other classical psychedelics do, but it works on like so many other receptors. And the experience is much more like, so it's technically what I would call it is an oneric, which is something that keeps you wide awake while activating the part of your brain that's active when you're sleeping. And so I said this yesterday too, but the reason that that's beneficial, my sister's a neuroscientist, the reason she figured out that she thinks it's beneficial is because the way that we store memories is through memory reconsolidation when we sleep. And so the fact that Iboga is an oneric allows for us to access our memory directly, right? And access all of these things directly. But that's from a scientific perspective. We know that the spirit of Iboga is doing all the work. And that's how we work with it. And it's a super intelligent medicine, and it knows you through and through. And that's what's crazy is it works with each person as they'll receive it, as they'll understand it. So everyone has such a varying, different experience. It's crazy. Like it could be a physical, like much more physical sensations that answer your questions, anything. Like designers and artists, like Chris up there, he has crazy visions and all sorts of stuff. But for me, it was always just a direct connection to my intuition and a knowing and my own, and it made me trust myself. Yeah. Is that it? No questions? All right. Thank you, everybody. What? You guy. Hi. Wanya.